Hi, and welcome to English-Fabule. Are you learning English? Great. Let's learn English with a very interesting story. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. Let's get started.
On Tuesday, February 24th, 2026, President Donald Trump came into the House chamber. Many people were there. He was going to give a special speech. The air felt tense. Everyone watched him. He then gave a very long speech. It lasted almost 2 hours. This speech broke all old records for length. No president had spoken so long before Congress. This long speech happened at a difficult time for America. Just days before, the Supreme Court made a ruling. It said that some of President Trump's trade rules were not valid. This was a big problem for his plans. Also, parts of the government were shut down. Many people worried about war. There was a big risk of conflict with Iran. People also thought about new elections coming soon. These elections could change who controls Congress. President Trump spoke about the golden age of America. He said the country was doing very well. But the truth was different for many. Recent surveys showed that many Americans felt the country was worse off than before. His approval numbers were low. This speech was his chance to talk to millions of people. He wanted to tell them his side. So, was this very long speech a sign of great victory, or was it a desperate try to keep his political power? The night was full of questions for the future of the United States. 2. Money and taxes. President Donald Trump spoke much about the economy in his speech, saying it was roaring like never before. He also claimed that inflation, meaning rising prices, was plummeting. Official government numbers showed some progress. The Consumer Price Index, which tracks prices, rose 2.4% in January compared to a year earlier. This was less than the previous month. Not counting food and energy, prices were up 2.5%, the lowest since April 2021. However, the picture on prices was mixed. For example, egg prices dropped by about 48% from January 2025 to January 2026. They were down even more from their highest price. But other goods, like beef, became more expensive. Ground beef reached a new high at $6.75 per pound last month. A major challenge for President Trump came from the Supreme Court. The court ruled in Learning Resources, Inc. versus Trump that he had overstepped his authority. He had been using an emergency law to place tariffs, which are taxes on imported goods. This 6-3 ruling, with some of his own appointees voting against him, was a big setback. President Trump later called the decision unfortunate. Despite this, President Trump announced he would continue with tariffs under different laws, saying congressional action will not be necessary. New 10% tariffs began right after his speech. He wants to increase these to 15%. His bold plan is to replace the income tax entirely with these tariffs. He believes foreign countries will pay them, easing the financial burden on Americans. However, economic experts are largely skeptical. They explain that the Constitution gives Congress power over tariffs. They also say that American businesses importing products mostly pay the tariffs. These costs can then be passed on to American shoppers as higher prices. Virginia Governor Abigail Spanberger stated that President Trump's trade policies have already cost American families more than $1,700 each in tariff costs. This warning suggests that tariffs might be a hidden tax on American consumers, leading to future economic and political discussions. 3. The border plan. During his long speech, Donald Trump, the current president of the United States, talked most about immigration. He said the border was now the most secure in American history. He spoke about stopping illegal crossings and keeping bad things like fentanyl out of the country. Government numbers showed that fewer people were crossing the border illegally since President Trump took office in January 2025. The president announced new plans. One plan was called the Delilah Law. This law would stop states from giving commercial driver's licenses to people who do not have legal papers to live in the country. A young girl named Delilah Coleman, who was hurt badly in a car crash with a truck driven by someone without legal papers, was a special guest at the speech. Her story was used to explain why this law was important. Another big plan was the Save America Act. This new law would change how people vote. It would make all voters show a photo ID. Also, everyone would need to prove they are a citizen to vote. The law would stop most mail-in ballots, except for people who are sick, have disabilities, are in the military, or are traveling. Voting advocates, people who work to protect voting rights, said these changes could make it much harder for some American citizens to vote, especially older people or those with less money. They worried this could stop many eligible voters. However, the president's words about border security came with a dark side. In Minnesota, just last month, federal agents, who work for the government, killed 2 United States citizens. Their names were Renee Nicole Goodman and Alex Preddy. This happened during a government effort to control immigration, which often became violent. Some members of Congress were very upset. During the speech, they held up pictures of the 2 people who died. They said President Trump's strict border policies were to blame for these deaths. President Trump also criticized certain groups. He spoke negatively about the Somali community in Minnesota. This led to some lawmakers shouting during his speech. They said he was unfair and wrong. Finally, the president announced a war on fraud. He put his vice president in charge of this. The plan was to look closely at how some states, especially Minnesota, use government money. This war on fraud seemed to target specific communities. Many people are now very concerned about civil liberties. They worry that these strong actions could take away people's rights and freedoms. This creates a big problem for many communities and makes the future of civil liberties uncertain. 4. War with Iran? The most serious problem facing the government was the chance of war with Iran. This situation had grown much worse since June 2025. At that time, President Donald Trump ordered bombings of Iran's nuclear sites. He called this action Operation Midnight Hammer. Now, the United States military was building up its forces in the Middle East. This was the largest military buildup there since the 2003 war in Iraq. General Dan Kane, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, was creating plans for possible strikes against Iran. But he also warned about the dangers of a big military action, like the high number of possible U.S. deaths. During his speech, President Trump talked about Iran with strong words. He said Iran and its allies caused terrorism, death, and hate. He also claimed that Iran's leaders had killed at least 32,000 protesters in recent weeks. Trump warned that Iran had developed missiles that could threaten Europe and would soon be able to reach the U.S. He said his first choice was to solve the problem with talks. But he was clear he would never let Iran, which he called the world's #1 sponsor of terror, have a nuclear weapon. Can't let that happen, he stated. Currently, the U.S. and Iran were in negotiations. They planned another round of talks in Geneva very soon. The U.S. had also put new sanctions on Iran. These sanctions targeted vessels that were part of Iran's shadow fleet. But Iran's government did not agree with Trump's claims. Iran's foreign ministry called U.S. statements about its missile program big lies. Ministry spokesman Ismail Baghai said that anything alleged about Iran's nuclear program, ballistic missiles, and protest deaths was simply the repetition of big lies. President Trump set a clear deadline for Iran. He warned that Iran had 10 to 15 days to make a meaningful deal. He also said he was thinking about a limited military strike if no agreement was reached. This idea worried many members of Congress from both parties. They believed the Constitution clearly stated that Congress must approve any decision to go to war. Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia and Representative Thomas Massie of Kentucky both planned to introduce resolutions. These resolutions would limit military action against Iran without Congress saying yes first. Top Democrats in Congress urged the Trump administration not to take military action without their approval. They warned that strikes could endanger U.S. personnel and lead to a wider conflict. The Constitution is clear. Congress must approve going to war. If the president thinks military action is needed, he must ask Congress first. The big and dangerous question remained: would President Trump attack Iran without permission from Congress? The next weeks would show the answer. 5. A loud night. The night in the House chamber was full of noise and strong feelings. Not everyone agreed with President Donald Trump. Early in the speech, Representative Al Green, a Democrat from Texas, held up a sign. It said, "Black people aren't apes." This was a clear reference to something President Trump had posted online. Because of this action, Representative Green was quickly asked to leave the room by officials. This was not his first time. It was the second time he was ejected during a Trump speech. As President Trump continued to speak, other Democratic representatives also made their voices heard. Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, both from Minnesota, heckled the president from their seats. When he spoke about illegal immigration and a fraud investigation targeting the Somali community in Minnesota, Representative Omar shouted, "You should be ashamed," at the president. Nearby, Representative Tlaib yelled, "Liar." Their strong feelings were very clear. Part of their anger came from the recent deaths of 2 U.S. citizens in Minneapolis during a government immigration crackdown in January. Other Democratic members also joined in, shouting at President Trump. Despite these angry outbursts, there were also moments of shared pride and unity. The men's Olympic hockey team, who had just won a gold medal at the Milan Winter Olympics, entered the chamber. They received a very big and emotional standing ovation from lawmakers on both sides of the aisle. People cheered USA and clapped loudly, showing their national pride. President Trump also took time to honor brave Americans. Chief Warrant Officer Eric Slover received the Medal of Honor, the nation's highest military award, for his actions. Later, First Lady Melania Trump presented another Medal of Honor to Royce Williams. Mr. Williams was a 100-year-old Navy pilot who served with great courage during the Korean War. These presentations brought many people to their feet in applause, showing respect for their service. Even with these loud moments of unity and applause, the feelings in the room were deeply divided. The strong cheers and shouts showed a country split by different ideas. The night in the chamber showed a nation with very strong opinions and very different visions for its future. This deep division hinted at a difficult election season that would soon begin. 6. The other side. After President Trump finished his record-breaking speech, it was time for the opposition to respond. Virginia Governor Abigail Spanberger delivered the official Democratic rebuttal. She spoke from Williamsburg, Virginia, outlining her party's views for the nation. Governor Spanberger claimed that President Trump did what he always does. He lied, he blamed others, and he tried to distract the public. She argued that he offered no real solutions for the country's important challenges. In her view, he was actively making many problems worse. She said directly, "We did not hear truth from our president." Her response centered on three main questions she posed to the American people. First, she asked if the president was working to make life more affordable for their families. Second, she questioned if he was working to keep Americans safe, both at home and around the world. Third, she asked if the president was truly working for them. Her clear answer to all three questions was no. Regarding the economy, Governor Spanberger strongly criticized President Trump's actions. She stated that his careless trade policies had forced American families to pay more than $1,700 each year in tariff costs. This statement directly challenged President Trump's economic narrative, where he claimed tariffs were paid by other countries and helped the economy roar. She also commented on immigration, saying that enforcement raids caused many civil liberties violations and created fear in communities. She highlighted that federal agents had arrested American citizens and people who wished to become Americans. The upcoming midterm elections scheduled for November were crucial. They would decide which party controlled Congress. Republicans held slim majorities in both the House of Representatives and the Senate. A poor performance by Republicans in November could stop President Trump from passing new laws for the rest of his term. Democrats saw a good chance to win enough seats to take control of the House. Their strategy focused on key themes like freedom and affordability, aiming to appeal to voters. If the House flipped, it would have critical implications for President Trump's remaining time in office. The big question remained: would these messages be strong enough to shift power in Washington? 7. New rules. President Donald Trump's long speech also included new rules for domestic life. These were policies that might not make big headlines, but touch people every day. One such idea was the Ratepayer Protection Pledge. This plan aims to make big technology companies responsible for powering their own large data centers. These centers are important for artificial intelligence, or AI. Many citizens have seen their electricity bills go up because these AI centers use so much power. Another proposal focused on helping people save for retirement. For those forgotten American workers who do not have a retirement plan from their employer, President Trump wants to help. He plans to match their savings with up to $1,000 each year. The White House said more details on this program would be shared soon. On housing, the president spoke about making homes more accessible for families. He asked Congress to pass a law that would stop large corporations from buying single-family homes. President Trump stated that homes should belong to people, not big companies. He wants to make his existing order on this issue a permanent law. He also talked about a law from last year, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. This act cut money from important government programs like Medicaid and food stamps, which help many families. Experts who study government money found that most of the tax savings from this bill went to wealthy people. Middle-income families got a smaller benefit, perhaps $500 to $1,000 a year. But for families earning less than $55,000 annually,
The money they lost from cuts to these help programs was often more than any tax savings. This means some poorer families ended up worse off. So the big question is, do these new rules truly help the average person President Trump often mentions, or do the real numbers tell a different story about who benefits? The future. The president's long speech was over, but it left many questions. Fact checkers looked closely at the information given. President Donald Trump claimed that over $18 trillion in new investments were coming to the country. However, official government websites showed a different number, less than $10 trillion.
He also stated that Iran's nuclear program was completely obliterated after a bombing. Still, some experts in the government believed Iran was only a week away from being able to develop nuclear weapons. This showed that the program was not fully destroyed. Regarding tariffs, President Trump said that foreign countries paid these taxes, but many independent studies found that American businesses and everyday people in the United States actually paid most of the money for these tariffs. Also, when he spoke about crime in Washington, D.C., he said there was almost no crime. But police records showed many serious crimes had happened, including 9 homicides, 126 assaults, and 322 car thefts since the start of the year. This information showed a different picture than the president presented. Looking to the future, big challenges awaited the country. The new global tariffs, which President Trump put in place, would face many more legal problems. The courts would have to decide if these new laws were allowed under the Constitution. The unresolved situation with Iran was also a major concern. Diplomatic talks were still happening in Geneva, but the possibility of a military strike remained. This decision would have serious effects on America and the world. Another important event was the midterm elections in November. Democrats needed to win only a few more seats to get control of the House of Representatives.
If they did, President Trump's plans for the second half of his term would be much harder to achieve. The government shutdown of the Department of Homeland Security was also still ongoing, adding to the political tension. The State of the Union speech showed a president at a crossroads. He was ready to test the very limits of his executive power, often challenging the courts and Congress. The months ahead promised a time of major changes and many important battles for the United States.
Hey there! Just a second before you go. If you learned something new today, please give this video a like, write your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. It only takes a second, and it really, really helps to create even better English videos for you. Your support means the world. Thank you.